Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for doing this.
Of course, my pleasure.
Oh yeah. Well, and congratulations, since on top of there being a gold statue somewhere in your home, this was, I think, a pretty good year. You have two scores that are highly thought of in films that are highly thought. One of them references you directly. Like
Yeah.
there's a certain level that I think, especially with composers, sometimes it's as long as we're not thinking of the work, it's good. It's a weird compliment. Like
Yeah,
score works, nobody really says anything about it, but it's why the movie's good. And then
yeah.
there's this level that a few people get to where the composer is almost why you're excited to watch it. And you've sort of very quickly gotten there. Does it feel different? Is there ever a minute where like you realize like, oh shit, like I've ascended in the industry, or does it just feel natural and this is the next job and I hope I do a good job?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like that because I think as soon as you start to think in these kind of terms like, oh man, I'm doing a great job,
Yeah.
that that's it's a very dangerous direction to go
You're not working as hard. Yeah.
as a creative because I think when you're creating, you're always I think it's always a very vulnerable place, no matter how successful seemingly you are outwardly or how good you're supposed to be I think you're always starting from zero basically for
Yeah.
every when you start a project. Oh, I read this beautiful interview with another composer that I absolutely adore called David Lang, and he said, which I just like really relate to, and he said it so beautifully. He said like whenever I finish a project, I feel like I've completely forgotten how to write music. So
Yeah.
whenever I start, I'm just so surprised that I can even write any music
Well,
to begin
it's
with.
it's also such a unique situation. You know, a cinematographer is there on day one. He's there or she's there weeks, months before.
Yeah,
You have scenarios where you'll be brought on in pre-production, and here's what we're thinking of, and what do you think of? But there's also times I've been doing a bunch of composer interviews recently, where you'll get the like, okay, I need 2 hours of music in like 3 weeks. Here's a
yeah.
completed movie. It's silent. Go ahead. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely different people like to work in very different ways, and that's what's so beautiful about different people is how different we are. And some composers really love coming in late and having basically like a final cut and writing from there and being very kind of clear on how the pacing of the cut is and all that. And I totally get that, but I think my preference is really to come in early, and it's highly impractical to work in that way because it takes like 57 times longer.
So
you
there's
know
no film shot yet, you're saying.
yeah.
You need to think about the music. All right.
Exactly, and you don't get paid anymore.
Yeah.
You're just on the job for like 2 years. You
Like,
know?
oh, one check is what I'm getting. I'm getting one check. All right. Okay.
Exactly. So it is highly impractical. So I totally understand that not everyone likes to love like likes to work like this, but or love like this.
Yeah.
I think it's actually a very good
Well, if
split.
anything, that's where
Yeah.
we're getting to a higher status. Gives you the power to say, well, I want to, if I'm interested in a project, I want to be on the ground floor. I want to have that
Exactly. Yeah.
conversation.
Well, the thing that I find so interesting about working in film music is that I think all the elements that come together to make up a film, which there are so many elements. There's so many threads that come together to make up a whole film, and most of these elements are so musical. We have
Mhm.
this timeline, we have these movements, we have pacing, we have there's a lot of music that's happening in the cinematography, in the acting, in the editing, in all these different phases. And I think the more that the music can be infused in the strands of those strands of the DNA from like really early on, it for me it makes the process so much more fun and interesting because you're like a part of the
Yeah.
whole storytelling process. You're not just like running after an edit, but you can really be a part of setting the whole atmosphere and the whole pacing of the film, which I've been doing for these for most of my last films. That's really what I've been doing, like playing music on set, and so the music can really inform that the acting, and I just think that it's such a cool way of for the music to be infused, not that I like to dominate the process, or like,
No.
that I need to be the one who, informs these, it's not like that, but it's more, it becomes more of a dialogue between all the elements, and I think that's for me, that's like such a fun way to work like that, I
Right.
think.
And I think it maybe even subconsciously, but the projects that you seem to gravitate towards are ones where it's like, well, we're going to have times where we're just focusing on someone's face and we're going to need the right type of music because there is a real fine line, whether it's Joker, whether it's Tar, whether it's women talking, very different faces that you're looking at, very different scenarios and
Yeah.
reasons why the camera's there. But if the sound is too big, too small, you could, as good as all three scores are, you couldn't necessarily intermix them. They're so specific to the work and the
Absolutely.
tone.
Absolutely. And I think that's another pro of like, coming in so early, is that you really have a chance to live inside the world, and you really have a chance to really on such a deep level understand, like, okay, how can I best serve this specific project, because they're all so different, because all these stories are so incredibly, and that's the beauty of film, all
Yeah.
these stories are so different, and every person is so different who is working on these projects, so all these people see stories so differently, so just to kind of get to really dive into that and see, like, okay, this is the world that I'm living in now, and like, how can I support what's being said and what's being told, and I
And
think that's so cool.
oh yeah, I think especially with women talking, there's this thing the first time you watch. I had seen it at Telluride. I saw Tara Telluride too, actually, and
Mm.
you spend a little bit of women talking, wondering when it's taking place. And I
Mm.
think something that Sarah does real well and you do real well is you don't really give any specific hints. The
Mm-hmm.
music is kind of this timeless sound of what you would imagine that particular setting would sound like. And then you'll get like the car. And you go, okay, well, okay, that's a very the music. Like
Yeah.
we're starting to piece it together, but there's not this, you know, it doesn't cheat in a way that I feel like, not to say a lesser score, but a different score would have an older sound maybe, or would have more um recent beats, would bring in like soundtrack cues in a different way. It's so calibrated to the movie that I
Mhm.
can't imagine not being on the ground floor for it and not being able to like have the conversation as it's coming together. Well, what do you think it sounds like to the
Yeah.
director? Like that's a thing that I've heard a lot, is just it's a hard conversation to have.
Yeah.
The picture in your head has music. What's that music? And then
Yeah.
can I make it?
Yeah, because you can really have a real dialogue, because you also have the time to try things out, and to really discuss, like, where we're going, how we can, and all these trials and errors can really kind of move together, and we can really, that, because the music ended up really informing the edit quite a lot. Like the theme really kind of, it gave like a motor to the edit, like in a very big way. So the musicality of the tempo of this theme is really, like, engraved in the tempo of the editing, which I think is really beautiful, and it's so, like, fantastic with how Sarah decided to tell the story, is that, this obviously, it is in reality, like, it's based on true events that happened just like a few years ago. It happened, like, 2009. These some of these guys were tried for some of these crimes, and but these people, they live in an environment that is incredibly old. It's a very
Closed
old
off and old, yeah.
environment. There's no technology, there's no computers, there's no phones, and these people today, like, live like this, so I think it was also important for the music to be equally timeless as these people are living, like it's happening today, but they're living in a sense, like in a time time bubble kind of,
And the trial and error aspect that you mentioned, it's so specific to music and composers because an editor can sit there with the computer and show you 10 different edits and it's the same material. He's just clicking different buttons.
Yeah.
For you, early on when you're going, well, here's what I think the sound is, and for a director to go, that's great, but it's not where we got to go. We got to go this direction or that, or it's got to be bigger or smaller. That's okay. There's several hours of my life and work that'll just never see the light of day. It's just not
Yeah.
what's going to be on, and that takes a very specific conversation and personality type. I remember I was at an event for Sicario, and Denny was saying, he was working on, I believe, Arrival at the time, was talking about getting score clips sent to him already and having to say, like, this stuff is amazing. It's not quite where I think we're going. We're going in a different direction. Let's recalibrate. And he said it's such a hard conversation if you don't know the person, be able to say, work is amazing. I don't want you to think it's not amazing. I could never do what you're doing. I just want it to sound like this as opposed to that. And that's such a specific thing.
Oh God, I was a part of a lot of those, a lot of a lot of that music.
Oh yeah,
So
I was about to say you were probably there.
Talking about, but I think I think that's coming back to your original question about like oh, now I'm in such and such place and I'm so great, like now this is all going to be easy. I mean that's exactly the process, is that if you start to infuse your own ego into it and it becomes a part of your ego perception of, oh, but I've written this music that's great, and why is this should be, you start kind of like fighting for your ego like that.
You just come to the meeting stroking your Oscar. You're just like, so tell me what I
yeah. No, but that can't be a part of the process.
No.
Like you just have to, in this kind of work, because it's not just you and your ideas. Like
Yeah.
it's a whole team of people that all have their different ideas, and obviously that are all working under
Yeah.
the person that has the kind of the main idea for the whole structure, and you just have to kind of go along for that for that ride, and just leave your ego in the in the
And
truck.
you hope everyone does. You
Yeah,
ideally.
absolutely, and I think that's what makes the great collaborations, is exactly that. When you can have this kind of like ego-free dialogue, and you just say like, okay, this isn't working, let's
Yeah,
throw it,
you would
straight up.
hope that the director is like, well, I created this, especially if I wrote it, but I'm surrounded by people better than me at that specific thing. Like I remember
Exactly, yeah.
Kevin.
And I think that's what really makes the great directors, or at least the ones that I've worked with, that I consider like really fantastic directors, are the people who are willing to just like let people do their job, and to be better at their job
It's
than
a it's a
just like
real simplification. But I remember
it
Kevin Smith
is.
once said, like, 90% of my job is to sit there and go, yes, no, blue, three of
Yeah,
those, no, yes, a little bit more. He's like, I'm surrounded by people who do my job better than me. I need the cinematographer. He's way better
yeah,
at holding a camera than I am. Here's how you do it. And I think when a
exactly.
movie works, especially with your projects this year, it's because
Yeah.
everyone is in service and everyone is sort of
Yeah.
taking care of each other in a way.
Absolutely. And I think these two projects are just such phenomenal examples of
Yeah.
a true, like, both of them are really true collaborations, where the directors are really unbelievably respectful, and so generous and so open and so willing to try out different things, and so excited to try out different things, and to have a dialogue, and that just makes that's when this job is just like really the best job in the universe, when it just like you just get to dive into these juicy scenarios, and try out all these different things, and see also how it changes the story so drastically, with all these different things you try out. You learn so much in that explorative process, and that's what makes it super exciting, and that's why it's so it's so great to get to just like leave your ego and your preconceived ideas about like, this is how I work, or
Right.
this is how I want to do things, this is how I, and having like, I think when you say this is how I always do, like that's a great thing to leave behind as
Yeah.
well, and to say like, okay, this is the world we're in, how can we, how can we elevate it,
Well, I mean, the work speaks for itself, and you should be very, very proud. And I think as we wrap, it's it says something that, you know, having an award, being back in the awards conversation, having it be a sort of consistent feeling. It's not just, oh, the work is good. It's sort of a way of celebrating the work. And also, you know,
Yeah,
not for nothing, it doesn't hurt that, 99.9% of the composers who have held up there and given a speech don't look like you. So there's something of, I did this. And also it can, it means what it means to me. It means what it means to the film. It might mean something to someone watching in a completely different way. And
yeah,
20 years from now, I might be watching them do that. And in a way, I was responsible. There's something about that I think it's very easy to root for you, is
yeah.
sort of the
Oh,
grand scheme of that.
thank you, thank you. But it's also just like for me, because like being a composer, it's a very lonely job.
Oh,
You
yeah.
don't really get to see many other people. You definitely never really see other composers.
No, there's no
So
there's no jam sessions.
no, exactly. There's no jam sessions, and it's a very it's a very solitary job. So it's also just like been like in the last years, like getting to come out here more and to go to these events. What's just really been great is to meet the other composers and feel that, because I obviously don't live in LA either, so I haven't really been a part of this community that's resides here. So it's just been really fun to get to know people here and see what a great community there is. That's been the real treat for
Yeah.
me about all these events.
Listen, whatever you're doing is working, so keep it up. Thank you so much for doing this, and congrats again. Listen, I love it, so I'm thrilled that this is happening.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.